welcome back to Health Crash TV. This is part 4 of the Blitz Sugar Cravings series, and by now you should have a really good idea of the kind of things that are possibly affecting your system and underlying those sugar cravings. They're not just about willpower. Do you see how that works now? You can stop beating yourself up for giving in to a sugar craving. By the time you have the sugar craving, yes, you can make a choice, but if your cells are struggling for sugar, if you're tired and you need something to pep you up to keep you functioning, if you have not addressed other things in your life that are fulfilling you and they make you feel nourished and happy, you are always going to be at the mercy of the sugar gremlin. Part 4 is all about dysbiosis, and dysbiosis is where you have an imbalance in the bacteria in your gut. And the bacteria in our gut is like a garden where there are different species and each one keeps the other one in balance. And when that system is working really well, it helps us digest our food, it makes up a massive part of our immune system, and it's essential for our healthy balance and well-being. But when it's out of balance, quite often the organisms which become dominant are bacteria, they're yeasts, and these organisms love sugar and they're out of control. So what they want to do is they want to proliferate. It's like a basic survival strategy that they want their food source, and they will use mechanisms to provoke your body to want sugar to feed them. And one of the signs that you have a dysbiosis is when you have a lot of gas or bloating. As those yeast and bacteria are fermenting the sugars that you eat, they produce a lot of gas. So it might be, I don't know if you've ever had this where you're eating food and you just can't kind of get full. So you've eaten a decent amount of food, but then you're still hungry. And quite often that can relate to what's going on either digestively, so you're not actually digesting your food, or it's related to organisms within your gut. In the natural balance of the flora in your gut, you can have an imbalance where ones that are already present, like a candida or a bacteria, they already hang out there and it's not inappropriate for them to be there. Where it is inappropriate is for them to be in larger numbers. Now this often happens because in our modern world, we're surrounded by chemicals in our cleaning products, in our makeup, in shampoo. There is pesticides and fungicides in our vegetables where they've been sprayed, if they're not organic. And even in the organic ones, there may be a slight residue because it's in our water and in our soils now. We take pharmaceutical medications and we also take antibiotics. So in the meat that we eat, if that meat isn't well farmed, often in an intensive farming environment, the animals get quite sick. And so to keep disease from spreading, the animals are routinely given antibiotics. And even if it's not routinely, the animals get sick quite often because they can't move around, they don't get enough fresh air, they don't get enough sunlight. And so they're kind of sickly. They're like us. We need nature and fresh air and moving around and good food. And they're often fed feed, which isn't high quality. They don't get to move around. And so they get sick. So they get sick, they get antibiotics injected into them, and then we consume residues of those antibiotics when we're eating their meat. And depending on the amount of meat and the amount of commercial meat that you eat, you could be exposed to quite high levels of antibiotics. And actually part of the problem with antibiotic resistance is that we're getting doses of it all the time in our meat. Now those antibiotics actually have a negative effect on our good bacteria first. And so it leaves the other bacteria to get more dominant and then have more fermentation, and it leaves room for yeast to proliferate. And they also leave room for parasites to come in. And parasites are often thought of as something that you only pick up when you go abroad. Now think about that. Think about how many people they're either travelling abroad frequently, or there are people that are from abroad and they're here And it's just not, we're just not separated by borders anymore. And because we carry them all internally in our digestive system, it's not like you can kind of check your suitcase for them or that kind of thing when we're crossing borders. So it's really common to pick up things and be a host to a chronic infection. So what you'll notice, if you speak about parasites to a doctor, they will only recognise that infection when it's acute. So when you've got vomiting and diarrhea and you're having an acute reaction to a parasite. But the truth is that we can host parasites at a very low level and they don't have any obvious symptoms, but over time they're a drain on our system and they also cause havoc in our digestive system, and they really want sugar. And so because we're sharing our meals with somebody that's not in a symbiotic relationship with us anymore, they're a parasite, they're in a parasitic relationship with us, they're taking more from us than they're giving back, we can end up with sugar craving as a symptom of that. So how would you find out that you had a parasite? Well, first of all, you can look at your signs and symptoms. And really the only sure way of finding out is to do a parasite test or a stool test and have a look into that. To improve the environment of your gut anyway, you can try to use probiotic foods. Probiotic foods are foods which already have some good cultures in them. So it could be live natural yogurt. It could be sauerkraut, it could be kombucha, which is a fermented tea, or it could be kefir. And there's a lot of coconut kefirs around now and coconut yogurts if you don't eat dairy. The second component to that is to take on prebiotic foods, and prebiotic foods are the foods with the right starches in that feed the bacteria in our stomach in a good way and help to create balance and a healthy gut. So if you think that dysbiosis could be part of your sugar craving, you can either work with somebody to get that investigated, or just start by trying to increase and balance the bacteria and the types of foods that you're eating. As I've mentioned, organic foods are going to be better for your gut than non-organic food because they don't contain the pesticides and they don't contain the fungicides that are going to knock back your own good natural environment. Eating meat that's been grass-fed, that's been well looked after, it's outdoors, it's not going to get as sick, so it's not going to need as many antibiotics as the commercially farmed products. So just increasing the amount of awareness about what you're putting in your body and what the detriment that is. The really easy one to do is to take filtered water instead of chlorinated tap water, because you're minimizing the amount of chlorine that's going into your gut and having a negative effect on your gut microbiome. If you're finding this series useful, please share the videos, and I'd really love to answer some more of your questions in more detail. There's only so much information I can put here, so please feel free to ask me questions in the comments below.